This is the lesson for European history for Tuesday, the 28th of September in the year of our Lord 2021. Renaissance means rebirth. Rebirth of what, Jane?
Specifically the arts. They spent a lot of time in the Renaissance working on arts such as, and when I say arts, I mean like mathematics and sciences as well, because at that time it was more of like a skill that not very many people possess versus now more people have a general conception of science.
So you mean the arts and sciences within culture?
Yes.
That's not the definition I'm looking for, but it's also true.
The ancient...
Yes. The definition in particular that I focus upon is the rebirth of the ancient knowledge within a new Christian context. In the Greco-Roman world, you have the development of several different civilizations, most of which are cohered within the Roman Empire. And for a while, they tend to cross-pollinate within Rome. And then the barbarians come, and the Romans are decadent, and they fall. And the only thing that survives the fall of Rome, of Western Empire, is what? And I'm actually going to roll the dice on this because I've been saying it so often, I expect you to know it. What is the only survivor of the fall of Western Empire culturally? Please roll your number one. Yes, you do. The power is in your hands. 15. Let's see if you rolled yourself. 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15. Roberta, you can take it, or because you've already answered a question, you can pass it on to somebody else.
I can guess that it's...
Which religion in particular? Christianity. Which particular, and I'll take anyone's answer on this, which particular aspect of Christianity or institution thereof? Pius?
Roman Catholic.
The Roman Catholic, or what becomes the Roman Catholic, what more properly at this point is called Western Christian. So, the Western Christian Church survives the fall of Rome, but everything else pretty much dies out in a Dark Age. What is a Dark Age? We've also covered this a number of times, last year and this year. What is a Dark Age? Portia?
A period where there is no new growth in society. Society is not growing. They're like stagnant.
Stagnation can happen within a Dark Age. Sam?
It's where the ideas and the methods of the previous generation aren't passed on to the future generation.
Because they are... Okay. Haley?
I wasn't going to answer that because they are...
Then don't waste my time! Yes.
They're forgotten.
I'll call it. They're not just forgotten. Actually, you got some of it, you got most of it, because they are irrelevant. Whenever I think of a Dark Age, I think of the statue of Lucius Verus here. And I use it as an example. Now that I mention that, do any of you recall the example? If you recall the example, have your hand up. If you don't, don't!
It's not up, it's on my forehead!
Yeah. Okay, so nobody recalls the statue and how that fits in. Sam?
Yeah, it's the sculptor, how they can make the hair look real, but that's no longer needed because you don't why are you going to sculpt things if nobody's going to buy it?
Indeed. So the skills of the sculptor of that really pinnacle of the ancient sculptor's art die out because it's no longer relevant to survival. Your great-grandchildren might become stone cutters who make take blocks from ancient Roman cities and build walls. It's not the same thing because in the end it doesn't matter. So a lot of the Greco-Roman culture and civilization simply die off in Europe. Doesn't happen in the Byzantine Empire, doesn't happen in the Islamic Middle East, but it does happen in Europe. Haley?
Do you think that America's in a dark age?
No, but you know my ideas well enough to know that I'm concerned about where we are culturally. I really am. And whether you are or not, you should pay enough attention to have an opinion about it. I know that you personally do. Notice her attempt to try to draw me off topic.
No, I just
and the failure of it.
That was a genuine question.
Okay. Well, and I gave you a genuine answer, but I am not elaborating because I don't have time today. So, a lot of the ancient Greco-Roman knowledge that had been lost for 1,000 years is finally coming back into Europe through a few routes. Can you guess or recall what some of those routes are? I'm going to roll. Guess or recall. And what we're talking about here is contact between the West, that's us, And societies that did not lose the Greco-Roman knowledge, that's the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. So think about, as you are about to answer, any points of contact in the Middle Ages that we've talked about that deal with that question of contact. Do you not understand the question? If you don't,
Yes.
okay, specifically, what don't you get?
Can you repeat the question? It didn't transfer into my brain.
Okay. You will tell me where this knowledge that was lost in Europe came back to Europe from.
Okay, where it came from.
Capiche?
Got it.
Okay. Capisco. Does anyone not understand the question other than Haley? Because at this point I don't care. No. Okay. Roll. And actually, you're number one. Yeah, why not? You're number one. Be number one first.
Fantastic.
Number one. Pull that in a casino and you'll end up in a hole somewhere. Go.
Main one is the Crusades. To
Okay. So the Crusades is a point of contact, absolutely.
Yeah.
Christian crusaders go to the Middle East, and they not only discover the silks and spices and the joys of a hot bath, frequently taken, but they also rediscover some of the ancient knowledge. So Crusader knights coming home have a taste for these things. Now, how does that taste, that enlightened self-interest that the individuals who experienced the Crusades, how does that inspire more contact? This is all review from what we did in the late Middle Ages section. Looking for somebody who has, yeah, let's fish.
They begin like trading with Muslim, well not, just like the Middle East and Asia for like silks and spices and all the fancy things.
Indeed. Now, the 2 points of trade in the Middle East were cities, one in Egypt, one in Syria. You may recall, does anyone recall where they were? Sam.
One of them was Cairo.
Cairo, that's in Egypt, and the other one is over here. Sir?
Venice and Genoa.
Ah, okay. He actually stole a march. The points of contact in the Middle East are Cairo and Damascus.
Called it. What do we call it?
However, the Muslims in those places do not travel to Europe. It is the merchants of the, how can I put this delicately? The crotch and backside of the Italian leg that do the trading. And that is the city of Genoa and the city of Venice. Thank you, sir. So Genovese and Venetian travelers or traders go to the Middle East to buy silks and spices. And as they're there, what happens? Just through normal contact, just through the daily contact of traders going there and doing their jobs. Oh, Fiona.
About your tie. Yeah, I was looking at it.
Here, is it better now?
No,
This tie, I don't know why, it has a mind of its own.
sorry.
That's okay. That's good.
She was helping me.
She was. It was the goggle-eyed look. So, how does trade lead to cross-cultural contact? Looking for somebody who hasn't spoken yet. Rolling the dice. I know you know.
No.
This is not a dice. Here. Go. You are. 1, 2, 3, 4. You rolled yourself. That is so fair. And that's twice in a row.
That's in a row.
So, how does trading with somebody bring other kinds of contact with them?
So they raised the prices for the Christians.
That is something that you should remember, and that's something that sparks the age of discovery. There was the doubling of prices almost, the so-called Christian tax. Yeah, there was that. Do you have anything to add to that? You're fine if you don't want to.
I don't know. Mostly around that area.
Look,
You can't say I don't
okay, Sam.
Yes, okay. So when
Thank
you trade with people, you have to talk to them. You have to be in their city, and you have to experience their culture. And because of that, stuff rubs off.
Yeah.
And then, because of the prices that are being charged, they want to find better ways to get that stuff for cheaper.
Mhm.
And so, get things like the Silk Road, which goes all the way across, but that's not really cheap right now.
Well, no, the Silk Road leads to the Islamic tax, or the Christian tax. But no, you got the point. Look, History is not just about grand things like generals and battles. It's also about everyday life. And this everyday life that Venetian and Genovese traders have with their Muslim counterparts causes them to learn things. Like maybe sticking leeches on the open wounds that doctors just made on a sick person might not be the best way of curing them. And it's things like that that bring things. So northern Italy is going to be the site of the Renaissance because it is the primary port in Europe, not only into which silks and spices flow, but also the contact, the ideas that cross-pollinate into Europe. Now, there is another region of Europe that has a different type, or should I say a different class of contact. Can any of you recall where else in Europe has intense contact with these ideas? Ms. Montgomery.
Spain?
Sí, correcto. Why Spain? What happens in Spain that causes all of this?
Well, the Muslims come up and like conquer Spain, and then the Spanish like conquer the Muslims, and they go back and forth.
Reconquista.
Yeah.
Reconquista. The Spanish are conquered in the 700s AD, early 700s AD. And it isn't until 1492 that the last Moriscos, the last Muslims, are driven out of Spain. So what's 1500 minus 700? How many years is that?
800.
See, I'm not good at the maths. 800 years. So for 800 years, the small group of Spanish Christians in the Cantabrian Alps are fighting their Reconquista. And as they fight their Reconquista, what do? Yeah.
They take back the land, but they also take the monasteries and the library.
They take the libraries, they take the universities, they capture cities intact. So it's no accident that not only does the Renaissance happen in North Italy, but that in terms of European superpowers of the early modern era of the 1500s AD, Spain is it. And Portugal too, because in certain ways they are the most advanced. Not only are they geographically located on the Atlantic, but they benefit directly from the Moorish knowledge, from the more advanced understandings of math and science and biology and so forth that the Muslims have. Okay, so that deals with the question of why Northern Europe and why Spain, see, Northern Italy and why Spain. And this is all because of the desire of Crusader Knights for silks and spices. But what it really is, we think, even in general history terms, that Greece and Rome are inevitably our progenitor, our cultural grandparents. And they are. I've argued that we have 4 cultural grandparents. We have ancient Greece, we have the Roman Republican Empire, we have what else? There are 2 other things that I have said again and again and again. Miss Montgomery.
The Germans.
The Germans who conquer Rome and their lifestyle. The lifestyle that we actually owe more of our notion of lifestyle freedom to the Germans and Goths who conquer Rome than we do to the Athenians or even the Romans. Because the sense of being a free person under a king. What else? What's the 4th? Sam? I'll give you a hint.
Oh. It's the Christianity.
So vampires, actually, but fine. It's the Christian faith. So, the Christian faith, and those are the 4 grandparents. Now let's look at what really is different in the ways of thinking of ancient peoples and the 1,000 years of Christendom in the Middle Ages. In your chapter 12, you had to do an opposed viewpoints between 2 documents. One document was by Niccolo Machiavelli, and the other, and he will represent the Renaissance point of view, and the other is Desiderius Erasmus. And both of them deal with, do any of you remember the basic topic that they dealt with? That's a long time ago, I know that. Oh, it's amazing that even a few of you do. Okay, Portia, you haven't said anything. Oh, I'm sorry, Shaughnessy. You've said less.
The idea of leading peacefully and working with the people in a more like compassionate way versus having people follow you with fear.
Exactly. Referring to that. So, we're talking about leadership, authority. And human beings are hierarchical. We have authority systems. I've already told you about the anarchy I personally witnessed in the Bronx and during the New York blackout riots of '77. I am not a fan. It's good that we have hierarchy. I need 2 people to volunteer to come up here and read. Haley, you've got her hand moved. I could say I want you to read Anglo-Saxon and do your best to pronounce for the class. And all that's on the line is your quarterly grade. But no, please come up, and you're going to be reading Erasmus.
Okay.
And who would like to read Machiavelli? Jane.
Where am I going?
You're going
Here? Okay.
and you're going to be reading Erasmus.
Yeah, well, I heard that part.
Okay. Even though I have the Colloquy of Marburg up for
So,
some
no,
reason, that's the wrong one. You know, I'm not perfect like you. And my urge to violence is somehow sparked. I don't know why. It's a good idea.
No, with the camera.
So, Jane, what page?
345.
345. Okay. You know what's good? Preparing. So, Jane,
Yes.
you're going to be reading second. Haley's going to be reading first. And the purpose of this, that's good. You'll be able to use psychometry to read. The purpose of this, what I want you to be thinking about, because I'm going to be rolling the dice and asking, what could be called medieval about Erasmus's ideas? And why? So take a few notes, and the question is, what could be called medieval? You're going to be listening to Erasmus from Ms. Velasco. Question? Okay. So what is sort of medieval in outlook about Erasmus's idea? And what is Renaissance about Machiavelli's? That's the question. If anyone does not understand it now, ask now or forever hold your peace. Because whoever I roll is going to try to answer. Fiona.
Huh?
It could be you.
She doesn't understand what
Knows.
Oh, sorry.
So, are we ready? Okay, what is it, Sam?
Well, okay, but isn't Machiavelli the more of the?
Well, you can make your argument when the time comes. Okay, and the reason I had you have chapter 12 out is because you've already analyzed these. So this is just a second opportunity to do so. Ms. Velasco, you may proceed.
Me first?
Yes. I said that already.
Oh, okay.
That's okay, you first.
Okay, great. Follow the right, do violence to no one, plunder no one, sell no public office, be corrupted by no bribes, as you would rather stand for an injury than avenge it at great loss to the state. Perchance you will lose a little something of your empire. Bear that. Consider that you have gained a great deal because you have brought her to fewer than you would otherwise have done. If you cannot defend your realm without violating justice, without wanton?
Yes, wanton.
Okay.
Wanton. It's fine. Wanton.
Without wanton loss of human life, without great loss to religion, give up and yield to the that's too much big word of the age.
Haley,
What?
break it down into syllables.
Importunities.
Yes.
You
Wow,
knew it.
that was great. Okay.
You knew it. Go on.
A good prince is a living likeness of God who is at once good and powerful. His goodness makes him want to help all. His power makes him able to do so. On the other hand, an evil prince who is like a plague to his country is the incarnation of the devil, who has great power joined with his wickedness. All his resources to the very last he uses for the undoing of the human race. A good prince is one who holds the life of each individual dearer than his own, who works and strives night and day for just one end, to be the best he can for everyone. With whom rewards are ready for all good men, for so much does he want to be of real help to his people, without thought of recompense. Yeah, okay, thanks. That if necessary, he would not hesitate to look out for their welfare at great risk to himself, who considers his wealth to lie in the advantage of his country, who is ever on
the watch so that everyone else may sleep deeply, who grants no leisure to himself so that he may spend his life in the peace of his country, who worries himself with continual cares so that his subjects may have peace and quiet. He does everything and allows everything that will bring everlasting peace to his country, for he realizes that war is the source of all misfortunes to the state.
Thank you very much. Now, if you wish, you may sit, since you've done your reading. Thank you.
Don't make you stop being on camera.
That's right. You were on camera, too, and you volunteered.
I did.
That's the amazing thing. So now I'm going to ask you, and there's a reason why I'm breaking this up and not having you hear both. What, in fact, is medieval in Erasmus's point of view? And I'm rolling. You were the last person called, so you are number 1, and we'll proceed this way. Will you roll, please? Thank you. 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8. Mr. Brzee, don't look at him. It's you. Can't deflect it.
Erasmus is talking like the qualities of good friends, obviously. I think you could like draw some parallels to like Christianity and like how like he's talking about being a good prince and how like if you're a good Christian you're gonna share some of those like traits, qualities.
Okay, that's the first step. Appreciating that Desiderius Erasmus is speaking in absolutely Christian terms. His measuring stick is the Christian faith and its notion of righteous leadership. Good. Roll. I'm going to take a second person's analysis and then we'll... 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Wait a second.
Yeah, you
Skipped
forgot
us.
us.
I did, didn't I? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Miss Davis.
I think it's about how supposed to defend your kingdom to save you really so they, like you said, sleep a lot.
Why should a prince do that? Look out for the safety of his people. Why should a prince look out for the well-being of his people?
So they like him, I guess. So they'll follow him.
Okay, it could bring loyalty, indeed. Now I'll take a volunteer or two. What more can you say about the medieval perspective of Erasmus? Okay, I see. That's fine. Jackson, we'll start with you, then Sam.
It's like a shepherd to his sheep.
Ah,
He is raised in a position of responsibility for the protection of his citizens.
indeed.
And kind of similarly, I guess another parallel to Christianity, Christians have to put their faith in their Lord to protect them. This is kind of a similar thing.
And one of Christ's big statements or stories about being a good leader is the good shepherd.
Yeah.
Definitely. So your pastoral, very good. Sam.
I think like there's a lot of the ideas in there about like kind of turning the other cheek, like letting you might lose part of your country, but at least you won't have started a war. I think that's very much like a war-weary kind of dark age idea. Like look at Athens when they were conquered. Like they were tired of the war, and I think it's very much like people felt the same way last year with COVID. It's very much like, okay, we're just gonna avoid as much extra hardship as we can to help people be happy and get through it.
War is seen as an end, not as a means.
Right.
And it's a bad end. It is what you want to avoid, which is a different approach than others who would say that war is the means by which you resist tyranny, or war is the means by which you acquire freedom or other people's land. In any event, yeah, all of this comes from, remember, there are two statements that are at the heart of all medieval culture. You are what your daddy does, and God and his church are at the center of all things. So, God and his church are at the center of rulership. Christ himself is the example of the perfect king. God has given you, through the almost sacrament of coronation, you royal personage, you king, you prince, you duke, authority in his name. And if you don't rule in a Christian fashion, it's bad. Bad. Does anyone have anything to add before we go into the now newly modern thing? Would you please? Thank you.
This leads us to a question that is in dispute. Is it better to be loved than feared, or vice versa? My reply is one ought to be both loved and feared, but since it is difficult to accomplish both at the same time, I maintain it is much safer to be feared than loved, if you have to do without one of the two. For of men, one can in general say this: they are ungrateful, fickle, deceptive, and deceiving, avoiders of danger, eager to gain. As long as you serve their interests, they are devoted to you. They promise you their blood, their possessions, their lives, and their children, as I said before, so long as you seem to have no need of them. But as soon as you need help, they turn against you. Any ruler who relies simply on their promises and makes no other preparations will be destroyed. For you will find that those who support you who do not rally to you because they admire your strength of character and nobility of soul, these are people you pay for, but they are never yours, and in the end you cannot get the benefit of your investment. Men are less nervous of offending someone who makes himself lovable than someone who makes himself frightening. For love attaches men by ties of obligation, which, since men are wicked, they break whenever their interests are at stake. But fear restrains men because they are afraid of punishment, and this fear never leaves them. Still, a ruler should make himself feared in such a way that if he does not inspire love, at least he does not provoke hatred. For it is perfectly possible to be feared and not hated. You will only be hated if you seize the property or the women of your subjects and citizens. Whenever you have to kill someone, make sure that they have a suitable excuse and an obvious reason. But above all else, keep your hands off other people's property, for men are quicker to forget the death of their father than the loss of their inheritance. Moreover, there are always reasons why you might want to seize people's property, and he who begins to live by plundering others will always find an excuse for seizing other people's possessions. But there are fewer reasons for killing people, and one killing need not lead to another. When a ruler is at the head of his army and has a vast number of soldiers under his command, then it is absolutely essential to be prepared to be thought cruel. For it is impossible to keep an army united and ready for action without acquiring a reputation for cruelty.
Indeed. Thank you. If you will, please return to your seat. Now, how is this a departure from the medieval view that we just discussed with Erasmus? Who was the last person to get called on by dice? So, will you please roll, and you are number 1. 12. So, 3, 6, 9, 12. That's Montgomery.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. How is Machiavelli's statement fundamentally different, coming from a completely different place, a completely different type of wisdom than Erasmus?
Well, he says that if people fear you, they'll also respect you and not try to, overthrow you.
Okay. You allude to the first difference. Above all, what does Erasmus focus on as the source of legitimacy and power?
So, not love, but fear.
Not exactly that. I probably asked that in a bad way. Where does a king's power come from? And who should a king try to please, according to Erasmus, the one we did first? Go ahead, Roberta.
It's like his people that are under.
He has to be good to the people under him. But the primary being... Yes. Ultimately, Erasmus's notion is theocentric. In other words, it is centered on the idea of God. Roberta, you're not wrong. The way that a good prince, according to Erasmus, expresses his goodness is by being generous to his people. So you're right. Go on.
I thought we were talking about the.
Oh, no, we're not yet. No, I'm sorry. I was hearkening back. So, okay, now I go to you, Ms. Diacontite. What is Erasmus saying the primary concern of a ruler must be?
Machiavelli.
Yes. What is Machiavelli?
now I'm not. Well, he basically says that the ruler is responsible. His people, and his people are the ones to judge him.
Right. Why? What do you think is at the heart of Erasmus of Machiavelli's? I really need to switch my settings. Of Machiavelli's focus on the people under him, Ms. Fish.
Mostly just like maintaining the rule, like just making sure that the people know that they don't want to mess with him, and that it's they're better off just abiding by his rule, because not necessarily is the king Machiavelli is speaking of. Not necessarily is he cruel. They just know that he's not one to be trifled with.
Indeed. Scares?
This may not be what you're looking for, but I think that Machiavelli's main statement is more focused on loyalty and getting the loyalty of the people, whereas Erasmus is more focusing on, like, being as good to the people as possible, regardless of kind of what they might think of you or what they do. But as long as you're a good person and a good ruler, then it's going to be okay. But I think that Machiavelli is kind of saying, you know, hold on, you need the loyalty of the people and the respect from the people, and just being nice and making promises, that's not necessarily going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Actually, Ms. Fish gave me everything I needed, but you did an excellent job of synthesizing. I'll go to others. Ms. Narings.
There's also a point of view where he kind of states that people are greedy and selfish, that without respecting their leader, they'll just kind of do whatever they want and they need.
Is he right?
I think so.
You don't think so?
I do believe so.
Okay. Well, imagine this. You have the job of being a soldier. You are hiding behind a rock in a hole because an enemy machine gun nest is right in front of you, up that hill. What is more likely to get you from being behind that rock? A sergeant that you love going, follow me, and running past you up the hill, looking you in the eye and saying, come with me. And this is a guy that, you know, he got you drunk for the first time, went through training with you. This is a guy that you trust and that you kind of love. Or a sergeant who is so terrifying that the thought of displeasing him brings on mortal terror because the sergeant is more dangerous to you than the enemy. Which of those two do you think is more motivating when the chips are down, Shaughnessy?
I personally believe the scary leader, because I grew up in a household that the rules say that if the main thing is don't do something stupid, because if you do, going to jail is better than coming home.
That's wonderful.
Exactly.
And I applaud your parents for establishing that kind of expectation. I do.
Yeah, so that's what I believe, because that's what motivates me. Is I'd rather face like the consequences than the enemy.
Indeed.
Well, not the enemy, but...
Well, no, I get what you're saying. Your ultimate judge, jury, and executioner under God in this world. Yeah. Try to be quick with your answers. We'll go Jane, Haley, and Sam.
To add on to Shaughnessy, I think what she's more talking about is how Machiavelli is talking about true human nature as far as like the selfishness, and then Erasmus is looking more at what God, I guess, wanted for as far as in the beginning of the Bible, he like kind of had this perfection set out, and that's what the Christian faith is trying to like try to be the best you can, and that's what Erasmus is.
Indeed. It is. Well, I'll go to my conclusion, but you're right there. Yes.
Machiavelli kind of reminds me of like a Nebuchadnezzar type king, because it's like, fear me, and then you'll be loyal. But like that's not always the case, and like, I feel like
when isn't it the case?
Caesar. Exactly.
Oh, Caesar tried to be loved as well as feared. That was his fault. He trusted Brutus. He trusted the senators. He also was trying to steal the state. I mean, honestly, I think I'd be a Catonian if I were in Caesar's time. In other words, seeing Caesar as a traitor, needing to kill him because that's the law. No kings in Rome. But, yeah. Can Can you think of another case besides Caesar, Haley, where where being feared isn't enough or isn't as good? What?
Hitler?
How? Wait. Okay. Briefly explain that to me.
Hitler was like, fear me, I got big guns. And then people were like, okay. And then he ended up dying. And then
How did he die?
I don't remember.
Big guns.
He killed
Yeah. The guy who killed Hitler was a real hero. No. Hitler kills himself.
Yeah. It
But
didn't end out well for him.
Some people did love him in Germany, but ultimately the last year and a half of Germany's war was fear. Actually, the last year of the war was fear. They didn't keep following Hitler because they loved the man. They kept following him because there were lots of guys with guns who would kill them if
My
they didn't.
point exactly.
Okay. Not what I was asking, but fine. Yes.
An example would have been Caligula.
Yeah.
He's very much feared. Nobody loved him.
No, and ultimately he teased the wrong people. Never, if you're an authoritarian dictator, never tease your bodyguards.
Right.
Because if anyone can get you, it's your bodyguards.
And then the other thing,
Yes.
I think there's a lot more enlightened self-interest in Machiavelli's statement, and he assumes that human nature is going to take precedence. But I think Christianity, in my opinion, overcomes that. And so I think both points are valid, but I think that not everybody's Christian. So,
Well, the society is overwhelmingly Christian in name. However, what we see here is a shift from theocentrism or God-centeredness in society to humanism. Now, I'm going to give you a working definition of humanism that you should have. So either look for humanism in your notes, it should be on the next page, or write it down. Humanism. Humanism is the prospect or the proposition that man is the measure of all things. Humanism is the proposition that man is the measure of all things. Humanism is the proposition that man is the measure of all things. In other words, that the proper study of man is man. That the proper study of man is man. So, we are moving away from Christendom to modern secular Western civilization. This is an important step. Machiavelli's primary concern is not whether God will like him. Machiavelli's primary concern is whether the prince will be able to control his people. And control is telling somebody to do something they don't want to do and having them do it. That's control. If you tell a cat to go eat and play with yarn and sleep, you're not exerting any power. There's no power there. It's not control. You're telling a cat to do what he wants. But if you tell a cat to go, guard some sheep, no, it's against their nature. Control is being able to reliably count on people obeying your orders even when they don't want to. And Machiavelli says that the problem with that is a human problem. It's good to be loved and feared simultaneously. And a good leader can do that. A good leader can wield a carrot and a stick. But in the end, if you got to choose, better to be feared than loved, because people and their self-interest will obey you more reliably when the chips are down if they're afraid of you than if they just love you. Because if they just love you and they think that you're a soft touch, they'll think you'll forgive them. But if you are feared, you do what they say or they'll hurt you some way, somehow. But don't be hated. Can any of you think of the medieval custom that was so stupid? I mean, incredibly stupid. The kind of custom that made people rise up against their rulers. It was something that was done in the countryside more than the city. It was done by noblemen. Do any of you remember? Sir?
I vaguely remember that the nobleman had to sample, fiancé at the time before he could marry her.
Prima nocta, first night privileges, which a good nobleman would never do. And I don't mean good as in virtuous, our Lord good. I mean only a nut job or a self-indulgent jerk would do that to his people. Because at that point, you're hated. And that kind of hatred doesn't dissipate over time. it actually gets, like wine and cheese. It improves with age. So Machiavelli does say, don't be hated, and he's right. Don't steal from your people. Do not take their women. Do not take their goods. And yes, feminists, that's the way it was. Things changed, but it took a long time. So, any questions or comments on the Machiavelli versus Erasmus, on the more modern view, more secular view, more humanist view of politics versus the more religious view? Quickly.
I feel like I personally agree with Erasmus more, just because.
So do I, on a personal level. But if I and when I am in a position of authority, I have to bear in mind Machiavelli's ideas. I can't be just, Mr. Happy. I've also got to be a little scary. And it's because there may need to be times, and it depends on the situation. I mean, certain authorities don't require that. But if I have people's lives in my hands, if I have to tell people what to do in a crisis when their adrenaline is just saying, run, 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 I have to establish a presence in their mind. And that presence needs to be a bit fearsome. But it also needs to be calm. You do not want a panicky leader in a crisis. You want somebody who's calm, who's capable of thinking while everyone else is going, whoop, whoop, whoop. Okay, real quick.
It's interesting how this presents itself, because Ms. Fleming for our final last year asked us, what is courage and what's strength and stuff. And my brother was talking about leadership, and when finding out when you need to be authoritarian and finding out when you need to ask other people's ideas and ask what they're thinking. And it was very interesting because we're having this conversation now. It's just
any leader worth his salt is going to wonder this. The worst kind of leader is simply unreflectively selfish, and they're in it for the power, the status. That's not a leader. That's a parasite, and it's a dangerous parasite. That's the kind of person that'll get you killed if you're under their command in a violent situation. Okay. One other aspect of this, before we go into the geography, is the role of the individual. In the Middle Ages, the individual was a subset of God. In other words, you are a created being, your primary relationship is to God, and God places you in a position in society. Your job isn't to rise or fall. Your job is to live a good life within that position. Turnip farmer, judge, warrior, artist, or craftsman, whatever. God places you there for a reason. You try to be a good person. How do we view individualism as different? That's a basic question that all of you should be able to answer. What today do we think of when we think of individualism? The role of the individual in relation to society, Michelle?
Being able, not being to whatever, being able to, grow into what you want to be.
Indeed. You are not merely a member of your family. You are not merely an extension of your parents' legacy. You can rise above your birth circumstances. This is why all the whinging and whining on daytime television is foolish and nonsensical in an American context. Because in the United States, every citizen has an opportunity to become who they want to be, or at least to try. No one has to be settled for what they're born with, unless you have profound physical or mental disabilities. You have the opportunity to work hard and become your own person. So we think of individuality in terms of defining our role, maybe in opposition to, maybe as different from, maybe carrying on the legacy of our parents, but choosing to do so. In other words, choice is at the heart of our identity. Choice is at the heart of individuality. Now, in modern times, how has choice, or in contemporary times, how has choice become, how can one say, maybe a little out of balance from a traditional point of view? What are things that people choose today that an old fogey like me shakes his head at and goes, no? Yes?
If you're a boy and you say, I want to be a girl,
Look, if you say I want to be a girl,
And look,
fine.
they change their body parts to be girls.
If they look, even if they go through the process of changing their body part, they still have a male. Yeah. So I will have difficulty calling the Jenner person Caitlyn because I grew up thinking of the Jenner person as Bruce.
Oh.
But that person at least made the commitment to change that, and we have medical science that, for better or worse, allows people these choices. Okay. I want to see, Sam, if you're going to steal Haley's idea.
Please don't.
So go ahead.
The idea, something that at least angers me, is the idea that people's great grandfathers and fathers' sins fall on their sons. That's an idea that's coming back now.
Yeah, the idea of hereditary guilt is something that is deeply un-English and un-American. It is not part of our tradition. But there are forces within our society that are trying to say, since you are born a certain way, you are to be treated a certain way, guilty or innocent, good guy or bad guy. And, it took a civil war and a civil rights movement to get us away from that stuff. So, no, not a thrilling change as far as I'm concerned. Haley?
Killing a baby.
Okay. And I know what you mean. I'm not going to go deeply into that. But yes, the abortion issue deals with two very different concepts. Both think they're defending freedom. The pro-choice side says that they're defending the freedom of a woman to control her body. The pro-life side says that's fine, but it's not your body when you're dealing with another life. And this is one of those irreconcilable things. And again, on a societal level, we've been dealing with this for a very long time. Yes. You moved your hand at the wrong time. I like it. Give me something. Something that's today that involves choice and individuality that may be a little strange to an old person.
Well, I don't know how much I'm on board with the changes that some people choose are inherently iffy, I guess. I think that exploring the changes that people are making is, I don't know, something that is good to look into.
Good. No, thank you for expressing that. Again, I don't want everyone who says something agreeing with my old point of view. My point of view is just an opinion. Opinions are like noses. Almost everyone has one. Modern people would not be exploring this question of individual identity if there wasn't some benefit to it, right? So you argue that can be a liberating thing. That can be something that helps the body and mind harmonize. A lot of people argue that. But traditionally, individualism, let's say 50 years ago, would not have included that kind of fluidity. That is something that's very much today. The idea of the role of the individual in society is going to change in the Renaissance, and the reason is that the ancient world focused on the individual in a way that the medieval world did not. We'll do geography, and we'll continue next time. Thank you. Come again. Haley.
Why did you say a nose?